How's it going, everybody? This is Mike. I'm back for a slightly different video here in my TV room, which is always much too bright, but I wanted a little bit of a change of pace. My good friend James Higgins has been doing a series of videos over the last couple of weeks showing off his entire collection. He was reorganizing his TV room, and everything was taken off the shelves, and he was putting it all back in alphabetical order. So while he was putting things back on the shelves, he was showing off what he had. So I thought that was kind of a neat idea, and I told him I might borrow it. So what I would like to do is show you some of the things that I have in different categories of my collection, some of which I've shown before, but several years ago, so a lot of things have been added. So I'd like to start off by showing you what I have in the Mgm Midnite movies collection, which of course most of these are from American International Pictures because MGM at some point bought almost their entire catalog. So let me start off and show you what I have here. I don't have a complete collection of this series. There are a couple of things in this series that don't interest me very much, like Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I really have no interest in owning that. But there are a few that I would like to get eventually. So starting off in no particular order, The Wild Angels from 1966, directed by Roger Corman, starring Peter Fonda, Nancy Sinatra, Bruce Dern, and Diane Ladd. Of course, Bruce Dern and Diane Ladd were married at the time. The very first of the American International biker films, and a lot of people think that Roger Corman was trying to remake the Marlon Brando classic, The Wild One, from the 1950s, but really they're not even close. But this is a very cool movie. It's not a great movie, but it's not bad. And no, Nancy Sinatra does not sing a note. I think this is before she started singing. I'm not sure, but okay, Wild Angels. Followed by this nice double feature, a film starring and directed by Ray Milland. It's called Panic in Year Zero, co-starring Gene Hagen and Frankie Avalon, 1962. A film about a family that's going off on a vacation. They're in California, of course, and they look up in the sky, way back in the distance in LA, and they see a mushroom cloud. So they find out that nuclear war has broken out, but they have somehow managed to escape. So they're trying to survive, and it gets very cool, very dramatic. And then finally, also on this disc, or in this package, we have Vincent Price and The Last Man on Earth. Talk, Mike. Great movie, vampire film, which is actually an Italian film, based on the Richard Matheson novel I Am Legend. All right. Here we have a terrific Hammer vampire double feature of The Vampire Lovers and Countess Dracula. Both very cool, very bloody, and very sexy. Okay, then we have both of the Count Yorga films. Count Yorga Vampire from 1971 or 70, and The Return of Count Yorga, both starring Robert Quarry. Very, very good vampire films, kind of a late entry into that particular kind of category of films. Both very good. Count Yorga. All right. Here we have the Dunwich Horror from 1970, starring Dean Stockwell. Well, actually, Sandra Dee is top bill. Dean Stockwell, Ed Begley, based on an H.P. Lovecraft story. And I actually like this one. This was not a very successful film, and the last starring role for Sandra Dee, who had been a big star up until that point. Kind of cool. Kind of a cool movie. All right. Here we go. Vincent Price and Tab Hunter in War Gods of the Deep. I watched this about a week ago in honor of Tab Hunter, who passed away just recently at the age of 86, I believe. This is from 1965. War Gods of the Deep. All right. Then we have another double feature. These are two drug culture films from the 1960s. Let's see. I think Roger Corman directed one of them. Roger Corman directed The Trip, starring Peter Fonda as Susan Strasberg and Bruce Dern. And then Psych Out, which I think is a much superior film, was directed by Richard Rush. Okay, Susan Strasberg, Dean Stockwell, Jack Nicholson, Bruce Dern. Very, very good film. Both of them are actually very good, but I think Psych Out is a superior film. Very colorful, very trippy. Of course they are. Of course they're trippy. What am I talking about? Here we have another double feature from 1958, The Attack of the Puppet People, starring John Hoyt, a bunch of people that were in a lot of films back then, like Kenny Miller and June Kinney. And then we also have John Agar is also in it. Then from 1965, we had The Village of the Giants, which has a lot of overgrown child stars like Johnny Crawford and Tommy Kirk and Ronnie Howard, all about a bunch of kids who, because of Ronnie Howard's scientific genius, they find a way to turn into giants and therefore take over the world. Yes. Okay, here we go. Beach Blanket Bingo. I know you all love this one. 1965, Frankie Avalon and F. Uccello, Harvey Lembeck, the whole gang from the Beach Party films, and also we have Marta Kristen from the Lost in Space series. She plays a mermaid. And we have Linda Evans, who of course went on to be a big star in The Big Valley and later on in Dynasty. This is probably, in most people's minds, this is the epitome of the Beach Party films. It's a lot of fun. The music is terrible, but it's still a lot of fun. Most of the music was quite bad in the Beach Party films, unfortunately. Back to the Beach Party, we have a double feature, Muscle Beach Party from 1964, Frankie and Annette, which was the second in the series. And also Ski Party from 1965 with Frankie Avalon. Annette is not in it. We have, let's see, who do we have? Deborah Wally. We have Dwayne Hickman. And this is kind of an updated version of Some Like It Hot because Frankie and Dwayne Hickman dress up like girls to escape from something. I really can't remember. Annette does a little cameo role as a teacher for about 2 hot minutes. And James Brown shows up in this, sings a song, and Leslie Gore. Not bad. It's a Beach Party on skis. Here we have a couple of racing films from the late 60s, American International. One is Fireball 500 from 1966, starring Frankie Avalon and F. Uccello and Fabian. And then the next year we have Thunder Alley, with Annette being top billed this time, with Fabian, Diane McBain, Warren Berlinger, and Jan Murray. This was kind of a transitional period for American International. They were trying to get it away from beach party movies, which were silly and just a little bit sexually suggestive, but not at all in any way showing any kind of reality of life, into having a little bit more of an adult theme, which the sexuality was a little bit more overt. And it was also a transitional time for Annette Funicello. This was the last film she starred in at American International. Her contract was up, and the last film that she starred in for a very long time. She was called to do some things and have dialogue in Thunder Alley, which was much more adult than she had ever had before. And I think she did a very good job. She looked beautiful in the film, and she was always a much better actress than most people gave her credit for. But I think that she didn't want to change her image from being, you know, the Mouseketeer who was a nice girl on a beach. So that was her last film that she did as a young actress. Then we started with the Edgar Allan Poe films. 1960, The House of Usher, Roger Corman, starring Vincent Price, Myrna Fahey, and Mark Damon. Okay, followed by the second in the series, my favorite, The Pit and the Pendulum. 1961, Vincent Price, John Carr, Barbara Steele, Luana Anders, Anthony Carbone. I love this film, never get tired of watching it. Then we have this film, The Tales of Terror, which does not have the Midnight Movies logo, but for all effects and purposes, it's still part of the series. Now, Tales of Terror came out after, I believe either it came out after The Pit and the Pendulum, or it might have come out after The Premature Burial. I'm not sure. It was 1962. 3 stories, all based on Poe stories, and Vincent Price, Peter Lorre, Basil Rathbone, Deborah Paget, and Joyce Jameson. Now, Vincent Price is in all 3, and very good. Roger Corman directed that as well. Then we have 2 of the best films in the series. We have Mask of the Red Death in 1964, also starring Hazel Court and Jane Asher, probably the best photographed of all the films in that series, and The Premature Burial from 1962, which starred Ray Milland rather than Vincent Price, co-starring Hazel Court. All right. Then we have another film in the series, The Raven, Vincent Price, Boris Karloff, Peter Lorre, Hazel Court, and a very young Jack Nicholson. And then we have a film which was not part of the Poe series and was not directed by Roger Corman, The Comedy of Terrors, which was of course done for comedy, but it had all the atmosphere and all the beautiful photography of the Poe films, and it looked just like them, but it was all done for laughs. Vincent Price, Boris Karloff, Peter Lorre, Joyce Jameson, and Basil Rathbone. Very funny movie. Always enjoyed it. Here we have yet another well, no, actually, these were not in the Poe series, although they tried to make them out to be. Roger Corman directed The Haunted Palace in 1963, starring Vincent Price, Deborah Paget, and Lon Chaney. And it was said to be based on the poem by Edgar Allan Poe, which was entitled The Haunted Palace. But actually, it was a story, the case of Charles Dexter Ward, which I believe was Lovecraft. I think so. I may be wrong, but I think it was a Lovecraft story. Still a very atmospheric film. And the other is Vincent Price and the Tower of London, which was directed by Roger Corman at another studio other than AIP. And I admit that I have not yet watched it. So one of these days I will get around to that. Then we move on to Ray Milland in The Man with the X-Ray Eyes. And then we have, what do we have? Oh, here are a couple of films. Very strange double feature here. Gorilla at Large, which is a film made in the 1950s starring Raymond Burr. What was that actor's name? Oh, Raymond Burr, Anne Bancroft. Who is that actor? Cameron Mitchell. I could not think of his name. Lee J. Cobb. Very interesting film about a series of murders at a circus, and they all think that it's a gorilla doing the killing. And the other one is a film that I have not yet watched. It's called Mystery on Monster Island, which stars Peter Cushing and Terrence Stamp. That's an interesting casting. Okay. Here are a couple of films. Strange Invaders from the year 1983. A very cool movie. And the Tobe Hooper remake of Invaders from Mars, starring Karen Black, her son Hunter Carson, and who else is in it? A whole bunch of other people. Yeah, okay. And I went to see that when it first came out. All right. Here we go. Here's a combination of monster films. The Phantom from 10,000 Leagues and The Beast with a Million Eyes, both very good little B movies. Here's a film from 1953 called Donovan's Brain, starring Lou Ayres and Nancy Davis, who, of course, later on became known as Nancy Reagan. Very interesting little movie, science fiction. Take these off here. Here's a film from 1951 called The Man from Planet X, which stars Robert Clark, Margaret Field, who was the mother of Sally Field, and William Schaller, directed by Edgar G. Ulmer, who of course did The Black Cat with Karloff and Lugosi back in 1934, and one of the best film noirs ever made, which is Detour. Very interesting little film, early entry into the 50s sci-fi era, 1951. Okay. Ray Milland and Rosie Greer, The Thing with Two Heads, which I admit I have not yet watched, but Ray Milland must have really needed the money back then, man, I'll tell you. Here we have a couple of interesting science fiction movies. The Invisible Invaders, with a bunch of people like John Carradine. And we also have, John Agar is in both of these. Great John Agar. I love this guy. Made a lot of science fiction films. Journey to the Seventh Planet, which is a very nice science fiction movie. Early 60s. Or maybe late 50s, I'm not sure. The Monster That Challenged the World. How many times have you seen that? Come on, folks. Here we have another. This is the last entry in the Edgar Allan Poe series, directed by Roger Corman. The Tomb of Ligeia, Vincent Price and Elizabeth Shepard. The only one filmed on location in England, and a very beautiful film. And this is Vincent Price, An Evening with Edgar Allan Poe, where he reads some of the Poe stories, and very well, very effectively. Here we go from 1958, It, the Terror from Beyond Space, which is one of my favorite science fiction space movies. And this is what a lot of people consider to be the origin of the idea behind the movie Alien, where a bunch of people have landed on a planet, and they find out that there's a monster that has come with them, and he's trying to kill everyone. Huh? All right. Die, Monster, Die from 1965 from American International, Boris Karloff and Nick Adams. Again, based on an H.P. Lovecraft story called The Color Out of Space. Always liked this movie a lot. Here we have a couple of teenage fantasies from the 1960s. One is Wild in the Streets, which I love. This is, let's see, who is this guy? What's the name of this young actor? Where are my glasses? Man, I can't remember anything anymore. This is terrible. The top billed is Shelley Winters. She plays the mother of Christopher Jones, but he actually has the biggest part. Diane Varsi. It's all about, Richard Pryor is in it too. It's all about kids taking over the world they somehow managed to change the voting age to 15, and they put everybody over 30 into these sort of like these concentration camps where they're all put on LSD forever. Sounds wonderful, doesn't it? The other film is called Gas. It's directed by Roger Corman. I still have not watched this, but it's supposed to be about this gas that gets into the air and it kills everybody over 25. Beyond that, I don't know what it's supposed to be about, but here we go. A couple of ghost movies. The Ghost of Dragstrip Hollow from 1959, followed by The Ghost in the Invisible Bikini, which came out in '66 and was really kind of the end of the beach party themed movies. And in this one they had, let's see, they had Boris Karloff was in it. Oh man, a whole bunch of people. Ghost in the Invisible Bikini had Tommy Kirk, Deborah Wally, Harvey Lembeck, Nancy Sinatra, Francis X. Bushman, silent film star, Basil Rathbone, Patsy Kelly, and Boris Karloff. Wow. And I have watched that, but I don't remember a single thing about it. Here we have a couple of mystery films. One is called A Blueprint for Murder, starring Joseph Cotton, Gene Peters, and Gary Merrill. And then we have Jack Palance in a remake of The Lodger, sort of an updating of The Lodger, co-starring, well, a couple of actors I never heard of, but one actress who has a supporting role in this is Frances Bavier, who is Aunt Bee from the Andy Griffith Show. It's actually a very interesting version of The Lodger. They did a good job. Okay. Two obscure films about witchcraft. One is called The Devils of Darkness, and the other is called Witchcraft. Witchcraft has Lon Chaney in it. All right. Here we have Vincent Price and the Witchfinder General, also known as the Conqueror Worm. I still have not watched this, folks. I'm embarrassed to tell you. Here we have a couple of killer female movies. Shelley Winters is in two films. One is called Whoever Slew Auntie Roo, which I saw back when it first came out, whenever the hell that was. And the other is a film she co-stars with Debbie Reynolds called What's the Matter with Helen, which I have not yet watched. It's supposed to be very good. Here's a classic Mario Bava science fiction horror film called Planet of the Vampires, which I can't recommend enough. It's a terrific movie. Here we have a couple of vampire films. One is The Return of Dracula from 1958. I'm trying to get this done because video's turning out to be pretty long. Francis Lederer comes back as Well, he comes to America as Dracula under a different name. Does a very good job as a vampire. And the other film is called The Vampire, which stars John Beale, and it's not nearly as atmospheric in my mind as Return of the Vampire, which is always one of my favorites. Here are a couple of sort of biker type films. One is The Miniskirt Mob, starring Diane McBain and Patty McCormick, everybody's favorite bad seed, on a double bill with Chrome and Hot Leather, starring the great William Smith, one of the biker film classics from AIP. Here we have a great science fiction movie from 1960. Yeah, 1960, called The Angry Red Planet, which has a lot of great atmosphere and one of the coolest monsters ever. That's kind of a combination of spider and rat. It's very cool. Very cool movie. And finally, we have a nice double bill. Boris Karloff starring in Voodoo Island from, I think, 1958. And another one called The Four Skulls of Jonathan Drake, which is a voodoo story. And that's it. That is my Midnight movie collection. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think. And I'm sorry I took up 18 minutes of your life. Forgive me.